Hi guys, hello everybody.
Hello.
I am Danielle, DC, co-owner of Amityville Apothecary, and I'm thrilled and delighted for today's author talk. We have Maevius Lynn, who goes by Lynn, so for simplicity we're going to just call her Lynn. And this is her fabulous new book, The Holy Year of Thelema. Okay, so I have so many questions that I'm excited to dive in, but I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is a joy and honor to be here with lovely people in person and all of you online. So I am overjoyed by the turnout and just so excited to talk about something I love, which is magic, specifically ceremonial magic, and specifically my tradition, which is Thelema.
Awesome. So where are you visiting from?
I'm visiting from North Carolina, so yeah, it was really fortunate to be here, and it's my first time in Long Island.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
There's no cooler place than Amityville Apothecary. Just
I
saying.
agree. Yeah, this is a really cool place, and I definitely recommend people to come check this place out. You know,
Aw.
good energy here.
We love to support our authors,
Thank
and we're
you.
really, really thrilled. I know it's Mother's Day. For those of you watching the replay, it is Mother's Day, and we appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to make us stop here and to meet with your in-person fans who are delighted to have you here. And then for our practitioners, myself included, I'm not a ceremonial magician. I've not been trained in it, but I have a curiosity and a desire to learn more. And a big part of our mission here at Amityville Apothecary is to provide every practitioner with the tools and knowledge that they need for whatever their path is, whatever their course is. So if you're a solo practitioner, if you're a crystal healer, if you're a ceremonial high magician, if you're a beginner or an expert, to really equip and empower you with the resources, the experts, the knowledge. We're going to close that door. Thank you. Bye. Okay, cool. Can't control little children go to the ice cream shop next door. But really, it's about empowerment and providing that exposure and the resources so that people can, practice their own craft to the best of their ability. So I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you. It's a joy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you get started in this track and into magic?
Sure, yeah. So my villain origin story started where I grew up, which was Florida, specifically St. Petersburg, Florida. And, I was quite introverted, and my main activity was reading. And so at the time, both the public library as well as the school library was getting rid of books they viewed as controversial. Mm-hmm. So the two that really impacted me was, one, evolution. I was very interested in science and biology, and all the evolution books were gone, and anything that mentioned evolution, so I couldn't read that. And then also, a very important part of my story is coming into my gender and sexuality. So figuring out that I was, back then we didn't have all these words to describe, what we do now, but I knew I wasn't straight and I wanted to know more. And the internet wasn't what it is now, so I couldn't just do a quick Google search or watch a YouTube video. That didn't exist. So it was in books, and I really wanted to read a book with a gay character or something because I wanted to know more about myself. Yeah. And all of that was gone. Even just a mention of a gay character that was pulled from the library. So what was I left with? Certainly not socializing, but so I ended up reading a lot of philosophy, so Camus, Sartre, Heidegger, and eventually making my way to Nietzsche, and was like, man, that's just it, right? That hits just right.
Wow, you're kind of smart.
No.
Just saying, I did light reading.
I will say I did not get it immediately.
We're just gonna oxygenate the room a little bit. So that's the squeaking. We're gonna put the door. And do me a favor, just close my computer because the cover music can go.
Cool,
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I was bored, right? So I would just read these books and then read them again and again and again until they made sense, which was a grueling process. But what else was I going to do as a kid? So
as a teenager, you're reading this. Wow.
I started around 13, 14.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
She's smart.
That's why I'm like, wait a minute, that's not like
I just had extra time. So, I eventually turned to LiveJournal. That was the Hopin website at the time. Made a blog to talk about some of my thoughts, observations, connected with like minds. That's when I first started calling myself an occultist.
Okay.
And then I first heard the name Aleister Crowley. Now, at that time, very hard to get a hold of any of his work.
Yeah.
Still is.
Yes.
There's a lot of stuff currently out of print. There was a lot of stuff currently out of print back then. And it's not like you could just go to like Barnes & Noble and buy a Crowley book. Right. So, what was I going to do? Well, just kind of file that away. And I continued to study, you know, and be involved. I went to college, you know, did all that.
Did you study like theology and spirituality, or
no,
a different track?
I studied science. So I was I did soil physics was my specialty. Yeah, I know, random. But
I know somebody else is that. That's cool. Yeah.
So, but I was really involved in the free thought movement in college, and specifically served as the president of the Free Thought Society.
Which is what?
Free thinking is a reference to questioning dogmas, overarching moral things we hold as we assume, right?
That's
Assumptions.
so cool. I'm so down for that, yeah.
And
cool.
Interestingly enough, also ties into Aleister Crowley's backstory, right? So he was also heavily involved in the free thought movement. Anyway, so yeah, I continued to study just on my own, and then eventually life happened, a whole lifetime, you know, ended up in the corporate workforce, very unfulfilling. And I think this was the point that was sort of a watershed moment, and it was, I hid all of that stuff about myself. I was not public about being an occultist like many people. Mm-hmm. I wasn't really practicing very much. However, I just felt so empty inside in the corporate world, and I felt so profoundly lost. So as a result, I decided to go back to my occult grab bag of tools and dig around. I was like, well, what in terms of philosophy and occult thinking do people have, you know? And my mind went back to Aleister Crowley and this idea of true will. And this idea to a spiritual path, a system of mysticism, to discover this true will. This innermost spark of divinity within all of us. And then to have the tools to align your life and your actions with that.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that sounds good. And I honestly didn't expect much success. And I undertook a working or a long ritual, if you will, for over a year. And for our ceremonial magicians, that's quite normal. You know, I
process.
and I had quite success. And it was then I realized, you know, as a result of that work, a lot of things, but one of them is I felt called to not only dive deeper, but be of service to the community. And, you know, that's many over the years of doing various stuff for the magical community, you know, everything from, you know, writing articles in magazines to my YouTube channel to giving lectures such as this, appearances at pagan conferences, doing ritual for the community. You know, eventually there was a big need for a book involving the holidays, specifically of this tradition, and I stood up and I wrote that book, and here I am.
This is okay. That's awesome.
That's a lot.
It's cool. Well, it's a lot because you mentioned there was a lack of readily available resources and knowledge and books, and definitely I relate to that. I think all of us can relate to that. You know, it's like you're lucky if you find a book. So during that year that you were re-engaging yourself, like, did you study with other people? Was it independent study? Were you finding books and resources that you can get your hands on, or did you tap into groups of people that were already practicing to re-engage yourself, or anybody that might be interested in learning more?
Yeah, so that was entirely solo work. So most of my life I've been a solo practitioner, and it is important to note along this journey, you know, I have been initiated into Temple of the Silver Star as well as OTO.
And what is OTO? Because, like, for you guys, I know this is like basic stuff, but like, what is AA? What is,
great.
I like Amityville Apothecary, but I'm a little biased. But AA and then OTO, like, what are those? Can anybody do this? Or
absolutely. Fantastic question. I love that. So, first of all, anyone can practice Thelema, and in order to practice Thelema, you do not have to initiate into a group. It's there if you want that support, if you want that community. There's a lot of options out there. So sort of the two classic organizations associated with Aleister Crowley, one being OTO, or Ordo Templi Orientis, and that the technical term is a paramasonic fraternity. Okay. So it offers Masonic-like initiations. It also offers through its church arm, Ecclesiastica Gnostica Catholica, something called the Gnostic Mass, which is open to the public and something you can engage with. And then AA is the teaching order established by Aleister Crowley, and that's sort of a one-on-one teacher-student relationship where if you want that kind of support in your studies, a great resource. There is now a bunch of different AA lineages. If someone's hearing this and like, wow, I want to lock in and like do this thing, I definitely recommend going to my website. You can find it through my link tree or whatever on social media.
But you can tell them your handles. That's
yeah,
cool.
okay, yeah, Maevius Lynn on Instagram or other spaces. And I do have a handout, like a PDF file that has a list of organizations I verified in person as the resources if people want them. And then there's sort of this third category of modern Thelemic organizations, almost an infinite number, but just to mention the one I initiated into was Temple of the Silver Star. And this is a Golden Dawn patterned order, so you can expect Golden Dawn initiations, but with a little bit of Thelema in, and it is in service to the AA. So they're not the same as the AA, but you'll see a little bit of overlap in the study material.
Cool. Yeah. Now, as a white woman living on Long Island, I have to say ceremonial magic has felt a little like intimidating for me. Sure. And I know you've said women have been somewhat underrepresented, even though they have been actively participating for decades, for a century that he started this. So thank you,
thank you.
For representing the voice of the women. So, help us understand a little bit about like how it's helped you, how it can help people, and maybe the core principles, because it's all about the will, but that's not ego.
Yes,
so I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to comment too. You make a fantastic point that, despite from the very inception of Thelema, there was, this came about as a result of Aleister Crowley and Rose Edith Kelly. There was a woman there. Women have been part of the vital life force of this tradition all along. Thelema simply would not exist without women. We've been surprisingly absent from the mainstream publishing industry. And so this book is not only unique because it fills a huge gap in the type of books on this out there. It's the only one of its kind. But it's also unique because of its author and the perspective I bring. So the perspective I bring is a queer, feminist, female perspective to this tradition. And as a result, I prioritize including not only diverse voices from the community and the rituals I feature in this book, but also the history. It's very easy to gloss over some of the other characters outside of Aleister Crowley in the history of this tradition, and they're in there. That includes, some of the Scarlet Women, but also people like Phyllis Seckler, Jane Wolfe, things like that. To return...
Pamela Coleman Smith, too.
She's mentioned there, yeah. So there's a great mention of a number of fantastic women in our history and resources there. So that's cool. And I say in my book, every man and every woman is a star. That's a direct quote from the Book of the Law, which is the central sacred holy text of Thelema. But with the inclusion of now diverse voices and women in the publishing world, we have more stars in our skies. So we all benefit from that.
I love that.
Yeah. So let's return back to the philosophy and all that good stuff. So I guess we'll start with some of the main philosophical ideas and get to the heart of it. The first one is the phrase, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." This also comes from the central sacred holy text of Thelema, the Book of the Law. And this phrase is not a call to do whatever you want. It is often interpreted as that, but it's actually a call to align yourself with your innermost spark of divinity. So what the one thing you are called to do on this earth, or the various things you're called to do. And that's beautiful. So it's a journey to self. And this idea that we are divine, not in spite of ourselves, but because of it. So it's like I said, a journey of self-discovery, a journey of finding yourself, and then embracing that wholeheartedly. And then the other big philosophical core idea is this phrase, "Love is the law, love under will." that is a call, this idea that as we move through the world, we experience opportunity for connection or love, and as it said in Thelema. So every moment we're connecting, every moment we are engaging with other things in the universe. But the idea, though, is to be selective over what we choose to do and connect with. To not allow in everything like a giant's open door, you know? But it's a call to keep your connections in check with your will, so that you may do your will. You know, we have this joy on this earth, this joy in incarnation, and the idea is to make the most out of this experience. And also in Thelema, we have this idea of incarnating into separateness, so that we may go through this journey and have the joy of union, the joy of realizing, you know, growing past that separateness into union, which is also part of the spiritual path. So, yeah, and I will say, you know, why this as opposed to something else?
Right,
and,
good question.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you.
Yeah. No, the vibes are there. No, I mean the vibes are immaculate of this tradition. You know, it's the energy is something I haven't experienced anywhere else for me personally, in terms of the rituals, the experiences I've had. But all that being, that's kind of a woo-woo answer. But the truth of the matter is, you know, it offers something very unique, which is not only an extremely fleshed out system of magic, and the philosophy is just world changing, soul altering, you know. So part of this tradition is made up. People often think it's just some dude went out in the world and collected a bunch of stuff and shoved it into a tradition, and that's actually not true at all.
Okay.
Other things are, you know, eclectic witchcraft comes to mind, even Wicca. The source of the material for this comes from a series of holy books, the Book of the Law being the first. So there's a lot of, and that means it's a channeled text, so no one like rationally sat down and collected this material. It comes from the divine as the source, and whatever that means to you. That could be God, that could be the divine, that could be gods, that could be spirits, that could be, you can take an atheistic interpretation and say this is part of the subconscious, you know, whatever that means to you. And so these ideas are these books read like poetry almost, these holy books. And in my book, in the appendix, there's a list of them that can be very helpful for people studying this. So it's beautiful. And these texts were channeled through the founder, Aleister Crowley, who is, let's just acknowledge, he's a very controversial figure.
Yes.
Very. But the truth of the matter is, regardless of how you feel about him, which first of all, please feel however you want, love him, hate him, have apathy, I don't care. But the interesting thing was he was a man who came from a fundamentalist religious background, the Plymouth Brethren. He was breaking away from these very oppressive Christian roots, where he did experience abusive conditions, and he experienced a lot of, you know...
It's that little girl again.
You know... So here we have out this gentleman, so he's breaking away from his Christian upbringing, he's making sense of the world in a new way, but, you know, and specifically the Victorian society, which was incredibly oppressed, really not okay with gay, you know, homosexuality, and, you know, he was...
He didn't care.
Yeah, he was not only a queer man, and to use modern language, perhaps bisexual, but he was also genderqueer. You know, we would call it trans, you know, and using modern language. He was also polyamorous, and he was also kinky. And he made sense of that in a world where there was no temple.
Wow.
And he did that, part of that journey to self and loving self was through magic and the occult. And he was...
And this is the late 1800s, right? Early 1900s.
Yeah.
Like, guys, this is way beyond where we are today.
Yeah, and he was doing that. And traveling the world, learning from all kinds of sources, doing magic, and doing extremely powerful magic. And so, when you start to dive into this tradition, you see a lens on the truth and beauty of what it means to be human that I have found nowhere else the same.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's hard baked in there. Yeah,
It's cool. It's cool. So, how does Kabbalah and Tree of Life fit into all of this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to unpack here.
There's a lot. I'm sorry if I'm asking.
No,
that,
it's wonderful. Yeah. So, like I said, the core of this tradition is the holy books, and I will say, these books are not another dogma to beat yourself up with. They do not tell you, oh, you can't eat this, you have to do this with your clothing. It is not a call to shove yourself into another box. It is a call to explore. It's a call to... It's really an invitation to think about things, to explore new ideas, ways to view the world. So, with that context, there's a lot of interesting things in those holy books. In Thelema, one of the things that's quintessential to all of this is this idea of aeonic succession. And this idea that humankind goes through different periods of time, about 2,000 years each. And this is based on astrology to kind of... There's a much more detailed unpacking in my book, but just to kind of move things along. And so, the first age being Isis, the mother, and the idea that humanity had a matriarchal society. Whether or not that's true, there's no evidence, right? What the exact date is. A lot of people interpret this as a sort of a poetic understanding of the passage of time. But then after the mother, we got the father, the age of Osiris is the idea. And then you might be like, why are you using Egyptian names? We'll come back to that. We're happy to get into that. And so the idea, and this was the age of Abrahamic religions, so Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The idea of the dying God, the idea of self-sacrifice in order to achieve closeness to God or closeness to divinity. And then, at the point, the equinox of the gods, as we understand it in this tradition, there was a shifting. So we had that astrological change. We also saw this movement into a new aeon. And we understand this to be the aeon of the child, the aeon of Horus. And that's, again, unpacked in our holy books. So that's when I'm saying these things, it's all coming from these books. And again, there is so much room for the individual to interpret. And the best way to do it is to interpret these holy books with reference to Aleister Crowley's writings. But, you can take inspiration from anywhere, yourself. There's a lot of fantastic books out there that kind of unpack some of these basic ideas. Oh, there's one right here.
But of course, we have some other additional books on Calvary, and we have both the Thoth Tarot as well.
So we're laying the groundwork as to why Kabbalah. So, like we experience these transition of aeons, right? In the old aeon, we had the Abrahamic religions, all of them, right? And with that comes what we consider a magical formula, or how magic operates. So I mentioned that dying God, that self-sacrifice, all of that kind of guilt and shame, which we're kind of sloughing off and moving into a new paradigm. The first religion to emerge from the new aeon is Thelema. It won't be the last. So that's something to think about too. We don't have an idea of what it's going to look like in the future. But for now, we have this Thelema thing, and I like to envision the changing of the aeons as sort of a sunset. So the sun is setting on the old magical formula, the Osirian formula, and it's rising on the new one, the aeon of the child.
Oh, that's cool. I like how you describe that. That's
so
nice.
There's a little bit of mixing in there. It makes sense, especially with who was the receiver of these channeled works, Aleister Crowley. The divine only speaks to us in the symbol set we have available in our heads and around us, right? Typically spirits do. So out came this King Jamesian language because it was Crowley. Out came the Egyptian stuff. Out came all of these things to communicate this message from the new aeon and how this magic works and this tradition works. So naturally, you see a lot of language that looks familiar in Christianity. Islam. Because Thelema, chronologically, happens after Islam. After the new aeon. So all of that stuff is kind of bouncing around in the milieu. Now, a lot of these terms mean something different. A lot of these ideas mean something very different in this tradition. But some of that magic's still there. Some of that magic still works. And so, and also, something to consider on top of all of this is some things that are universally true about the nature of how the world works are still universally true. You know?
Yeah.
So it's really up to the individual to kind of tease out how their system of magic works.
Right.
What they think about the aeons. And, you know, with my book, there's such a cornucopia of ideas and research there to aid you on your journey. You know, I don't tell people what to think. I like lay out a smorgasbord of ideas and I say, here's some inspiration, you know? How do you feel about it? What do you think? So kind of like what I just did there in that little like over the hill and through the woods kind of discussion of the aeons. Yeah, naturally there is some old aeonic stuff kind of bouncing around in people's heads, in our magic systems. And one of the ways people deal with that, you know, is, we were just talking about earlier about banishing rituals.
Yeah.
You know, an updated version of that would be the Star Ruby, also in my book.
How do you explain a little bit, like, you don't
Yeah.
have to go too deep, but what is that for those of us who are new to it?
Oh,
because
yeah,
I want to go down rabbit holes.
Sure. So the idea in a lot of magic is to use a banishing
And it's
ritual.
here, by the way.
Yeah. Banishing ritual before doing a ritual and after, so there's a nice symmetry to performing a ritual. A lot of people also do daily practice work, which involves a banishing. And, you know, a lot of people are familiar with the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, great thing. But sometimes people want a little extra juice. And that's why, as magicians, we think about these rituals in terms of tying it to the new aeon for that extra magical juice. And the way you do that, or one of the ways, is to incorporate elements of the new aeon, things from the holy book. So words, correspondences, substituting out some things, you know. But an example of a you know, new aeonic kind of banishing ritual is this thing called the Star Ruby, which functions very similar to the LBRP or the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, but it is its own beast.
Cool. And one of the things that I read or I heard you talking about, or maybe we were just talking about it earlier, I don't know, I could talk to you for hours about this, it's very neat, is Crowley didn't formalize rituals and ceremonies throughout the year. And the Wheel of the Year is different from the Wiccan Wheel of the Year, these holy days throughout the year. So you went to great lengths over a number of years to speak with different practitioners, to speak with different groups, and to come up with parameters to celebrate and honor and ritualize these holy days, which is what is all. So it's broken into like the beginning stuff that we're talking about for me as a newbie, but then all of you practitioners here, like throughout the year, giving them a wide breadth of information of ways to celebrate and ceremonialize. So, you want to talk a little bit more about?
I would love to. Thank you so much. And this is the cool thing, especially for people who are kind of new to this or dipping and dabbling, seeing how other traditions, different perspectives on celebrating not only the seasons of the year, but the seasons of our lives. And in my opinion, I think this tradition and its holy books offers a really unique, interesting window into understanding the self and the passage of time, understanding the seasons. So, our central sacred holy book, the Book of the Law, that outline, it calls for the celebration of certain days throughout the year, as well as times of our lives, and a secret thing, Tahuti and the child of the prophet. I outline a bunch of different ideas and information I researched on the Tahuti stuff, but we'll just put that aside. Unless people are like, oh, I'm locked in, talk about it. But that's really your best.
I just want to hear what you have to say about it.
I outlined 3 different ideas on that, so we'll come back to that kind of, because that's a lot. I get into fraud or cod stuff too, so that's
awesome.
Fraud or cod, and also Aleister Crowley's private copy of the Book of the Law, where he has notes in the margin. I don't think anyone's ever published that stuff before.
I feel like we had a book that had his handwritten notes.
So he had a, well, I'm sure you do, especially the Book of Law, but this was
that may be what we had,
his personal copy of the Book of the Law. We had some notes in the margin, but
cool.
to kind of rein it on back in what's going on here. So I noticed this huge need in the community because, yes, when you are starting out with magic, regardless of what that looks like. If you're a heathen, if you're a pagan, if you're a witch, if you're, an eclectic practitioner, whatever it is, and you Google magical holidays, you're going to find this Wheel of the Year, typically the Wiccan Wheel of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is the year is arranged by even spokes on a wheel, so equinoxes, solstices, and cross quarters. So when the year turns, the wheel turns. And this was popularized by a gentleman by the name of Gerald Gardner, where he took this format and he plugged in, he kind of like surveyed different seasonal celebrations and he plugged them in. So the winter solstice in this kind of Gerald Gardner understanding wasn't just the winter solstice, it was Yule, for example. And this sort of, now in the modern day, people pick this up and they plug and play and they look a little different, but it's still this format. And I was like, hey, things exist outside of this yearly Wheel of the Year format. Yeah. And that's interesting. To empower people to see the world and see the passage of time differently. Again, not only our lives from birth to puberty to death, but also the year. And the thing that predated Gerald Gardner and Wicca and all of this was this tradition, Thelema. And so for those who don't know, Gerald Gardner was the founder and popularizer of Wicca, what a lot of people are probably more familiar with.
I warned you.
So, Gerald Gardner, so he was doing this, but he was heavily inspired by Aleister Crowley, by Thelema, and there's a huge history there, so it makes sense. Some of these ideas kind of filtered into his own Wheel of the Year, but it is not the same. It is very different. So in this tradition, as laid out by the Book of the Law, which again, you don't have to adhere to, you're more than welcome to mix Wicca, to mix witchcraft, to mix heathenry, whatever that looks like for you. But I wanted to go back to the source and put it out there so people could mindfully engage and create something truly meaningful to them. Mm-hmm. So they could take Thelema as its face value, as laid out by Aleister Crowley in her holy books, and be like, all right, now it's time to mix and match, but at least you have that foundation. So in Thelema, the Book of the Law calls for the celebration of the equinoxes, the solstices, as well as some unique ones to Thelema. So the first night of the prophet and his bride, the 3 days of the writing of the Book of the Law, and then obviously wrapped into the spring equinox. We're also celebrating the equinox of the gods, the new year, all of that stuff. But I'm saying this, but to kind of paint a mental picture, this does not make an even wheel. It makes kind of a lopsided thing because the cross quarters are not in there.
She has a graphic comparing the Wicca wheel and then the holy days here for comparison and ease. So great job, like
thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
Yeah, so we're rocking with that. And so the book is this weird Frankenstein of both academic and practitioner friendly. So I took an academic approach to being like, what did Crowley say? What sources are out there? And I shoved it in there. And there's a lot of stuff that's currently not in print in my book, a lot of ideas, and even stuff that's never been in print in the academic portion. And then the later half of the chapters, that's where I get into sort of my own thoughts. There's recipes in there, and then I take people through a journey. Like you said, modern day practitioner rituals are included in there. A wide variety of not only my stuff but other people's and Crowley's. And I kept in mind what the community needed and wanted. So for every holy day, there is these like little, I call them sparks of inspiration, little like prompts, journal prompts, something really easy to do, or like a mantra or something like that for someone who doesn't have a lot of time to be able to connect to that holy day if they so choose to have something. And you can easily do that on your own. And then for people who want a little bit more, have a little bit more time on their hands, but not a whole lot, I have something called altar work. It's a small little ritual you can do at an altar, kind of pagan in flavor, something for my own practice in there. It involves typically 2 candles, a tarot card on some of the holy days, and something you can mindfully engage with, a small ritual. And then, of course, for the people who have the resources and the time and the energy to do so, there's a full-blown group ritual, which can be adapted to various numbers of participants. And again, that source is all throughout our community. So it's really, like I said, just this buffet of come do magic. these holy days
very
are
robust. No, it's great.
And these holy days are so cool, and I'm just excited to bring a fresh look at holidays and seasons to the magical community.
And it's great because you start by saying each individual has their own path of practice. So you can be different night as day, but there are common core themes, and then you offer the suggestions for different ways that they might consider the celebration. I think it's so informative. I look forward to really spending more time diving into this. So, do you all have any questions right now before we proceed? Because I'm the newcomer to this practice. You're all practitioners.
The Tahuti stuff? Want me to get into Tahuti stuff? Log in,
In True Will, is there any discussion to expanding into exploring collective True Will, where, let's say, I would not invade nobody's True Will, but we have this common goal that we can work towards that we have...
like a universal will.
Universal will. Is that even possible, or is it being discussed today?
I mean, I think you'll find an answer as diverse as the people on this earth. And I always take care to not give people the answer. I think a lot of these questions are something you arrive to on your journey. It's sort of, whether you're doing it in a group or out of a group, this is sort of, if you start on the path of the great work, it's an initiatory journey. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, you can engage with Thelema a number of different ways. Let me give some background information and get to your question. Okay. So this idea, I also mentioned what it means to be a Thelemite. So the term Thelemite is a Thelemic practitioner. It comes from, again, the Book of the Law. And there are so many different definitions, especially by modern practitioners, about what a Thelemite is. Some so broad it means nothing, and some definitions are so narrow it acts as unhelpful gatekeeping. Obviously, gatekeeping can be good when it protects the integrity of a tradition, but if you're keeping people out because of your own ego, that's not healthy. So one of the definitions I came upon was from Sabazius, Grandmaster Sabazius. However you feel about OTO or not, that's up to you, your own thing. But I did like his definition where he defines a Thelemite as someone who seeks to know and do their will. And paraphrasing here, someone who accepts the Book of the Law and what that means to them. So that at its core is what it means to be a Thelemite. And that can look so different along this journey, as diverse as people are. Now, some Thelemites, some practitioners, wish to undertake this incredible work called the Great Work.
Okay.
That is, they always say, the law of Thelema is for all, but the Great Work is not. And this path is something Aleister Crowley demonstrated you can go on, this spiritual journey, this path of return, the idea of unification with the divine, right? An undertaking you start, and once you start, you are on that path until its completion, in this incarnation or the next, so it's quite a heavy thing. But the idea is, this is part of the AA work as well. So, not Alcoholics Anonymous for those online who just joined. We're talking about the Thelemic teaching order of the AA. And so the idea of doing this work and this unification of the divine and return to God, or, all of this, is exploration of self. There's a lot of work involved, right? But it's not for everyone. And you don't have to do that to be a Thelemite and a practitioner. So, to return back to this idea of collective will, this idea of the collective unconscious, that's a very Jungian idea. I explore this a number of different ways in my book. One of them, I get into some of the Jung stuff in the winter solstice, because some of the themes I think are very interesting in the winter solstice, in the my section, take it or leave it, is both silence as well as darkness. And so, I get into Jung for a little bit of that. And then in terms of defining will, there is this idea bouncing around that once you are in alignment with your true will, it's almost like the universe aids you. Things are just easy on this path, and that's part of being a part of this moving system that is existence, that is incarnation, right? So you are, by virtue, I would say, of existing and aligning yourself with that true will. part of the moving, dancing continuum of what it means to be an incarnate being.
Okay.
So lots of things I just laid out to explore. Yeah.
It's a lot.
It
It
is
took
a
you
lot.
a few years to collate. You're right. So this is fascinating.
Ceremonial magicians, am I right?
Oh my gosh.
Only years?
Yeah. Well, just to write the book, it took her a couple of years.
Yeah, it
so
took me,
the
I
practice,
think,
I'm sure, is decades.
Yeah,
It's-
it took me 3+ years to write
Yeah.
this bad boy and research it.
What is the first night of the prophet and his bride?
Yeah, so this is a
I'm so
holy.
curious.
I know, right?
What
You
was
can
that?
you can imagine.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, so this is a beautiful story. So this holy day or holiday represents Rose Edith Kelly and Aleister Crowley and their first night together, celebrating their union. So this is a very interesting story, and I love this story because it gives me a chance to talk about Rose, who is often kind of left out of the conversation when she's a huge part of this. Rose and her namesake.
Yeah.
So we'll start with Rose. I think a lot of people are familiar with Aleister Crowley a little bit. You know, he was the kind of a wild child, a magician, all of this stuff. Although at the time, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, I think he had left the Golden Dawn by the time he met Rose, and he was actually a practicing Buddhist, so just for context. So Rose, she came from a very wealthy, well-to-do family, obviously, in the Victorian era, and her whole thing was, she was married, and then, her husband died, and so after that, she kind of had an explosion of self-exploration, and in terms of seeing many suitors at once, she wasn't really interested anymore in conforming to rigid Victorian expectations of a woman. And especially a widow, she was knocked down a station because she was a widow, and her family was very interested in seeing that she was a proper woman and marry again, and she was not interested in that. She was out there living her life, sowing her oats, seeing a lot of different dudes, including a married one. She was a wild child, quite. Another example, a little quick story about how wild Rose truly was, and a very self-possessed woman. She was seeing all these men, and one day she comes home and she tells her parents, "Hey, I'm pregnant." And they're like, "I'm sorry, what?" She's like, "Yeah, I don't know who the father is, whatever." And they're like, "Uh-oh, that's not cool, Rose. You need to get an abortion." She's like, "Cool, give me the money for the abortion." And she takes the money. She buys herself new dresses. There was no baby. There was no pregnancy. She just straight up lied because she wanted money from her family.
I like Rose.
Yeah, she's great. And I definitely want to paint her in this light because she was a force on her own. Now, she was not interested in the occult. This was not her vibe at all. But she was very self-possessed and just living a life. So here she was at this point, and she was at home and her parents like, "Hey, you gotta marry one of these dudes. You gotta marry one of these suitors. We're tired of dealing with you." And so what happened was she was, hanging out at home. Her brother was home from college, and her brother brought back one of his buddies from college, and that buddy was Aleister Crowley. And so Crowley, overhearing her plight of being forced to marry one of these dudes she did not want to marry, and she did not want to stop living her wild lifestyle, seeing a bunch of dudes all at once, which is a vibe. Go for good job, Rose. And he's like, "Hey, why don't we just have a marriage of convenience? You marry me, you do what you want, and I do what I want." And she's like, "That sounds amazing." And so they did. They literally eloped, to the surprise and shock of her family and everyone, and they were married. And the interesting thing about their union and coupling was they fell in love. And so it's this fascinating story of two complete strangers eventually falling in love, and their love led to the start of a new way to see spirituality and religion and magic, which is Thelema. So this was sort of the watershed event.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's a fun, very progressive.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what's great about this is, just there's so many ideas wrapped up in this celebration to play with. Ideas of fate and destiny. What does that mean? A lot of old ideas of ideas there to unpack. There's different types of love exploring love as well as a concept in this book, philosophically speaking, not just romantic love, but maternal love, all this stuff. But, one of the things I recommend as a ritual, which I think is really cool, if you want to reflect on love, whatever that means to you, is a tea ceremony. So the ritual is actually a shared tea ceremony. I recommend using rose tea, based on Rose Edith Kelly's namesake, and it was inspired by, I'm sure you have it.
What?
No, it was inspired by the tea witchcraft book.
Oh, I have one over there.
Yeah, so she,
Tea
Witch's Crystal Brews, and she wrote another one, which is just the Tea Witch's Grimoire, I believe.
Yeah.
S.M. Harlow.
Yep.
Shout out to her for people. And so
I don't have it in stock right now.
No worries. Yeah, but anyways, if you're interested in more tea rituals, that book is packed full. But mine, the idea of doing a ritual around tea was inspired by her work. And I will say, for people at On Edge, it's a fully ceremonial magic ritual, and it's one I performed actually with my husband, who's here with us today, not on camera, but we performed that and then adapted it to be like a larger group ritual over time, and I just think it's a beautiful thing. So it's if you're looking for an interesting kind of way to engage, even with like love as a concept, it's a good ritual to try out.
I like that. And you bring up a good point. One of the things that I read in your book is that you really want people to put this into practice.
Yeah.
So it becomes part of your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just learning cerebrally about the concepts philosophically. It's how does it apply to your life, and how do you put it into part of your regular practice. So
Absolutely.
what are some core things that you do, or that, I mean, like the banishing ritual, that's like a cleansing process on the daily, but what are some other things that you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought this up, because I have the philosophy, a little bit of magic is better than none. I really believe that. And so in terms of accessibility, the wide spectrums in this book, I want it to match the people who are reading it. So if you have a little bit of time, there's a little bit of things for you to do. If you have a lot of time and you're very motivated and have a group you're doing ritual with, that's in here too. There is an interesting question of, like, for a practitioner, what does the daily life look like? What does the monthly life look like? What is yearly, and for me, there are those daily practices. And I will say, the Book of the Law does call for a feast every day and every night. So for me, that harkens to daily practice. So banishings are always great. When I'm on game, that's we all know. When I'm on game, that would look like a banishing in the morning. Typically I do the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, and I use an invoking pentagram, and then a banishing at night with a banishing pentagram. And the idea is, like, an invoking is a more energizing kind of thing in the morning. At my main meal of the day, which is sometimes 2 main meals of the day, I do a small little mindful ritual called saying will over my food. People have compared it to saying grace, but it is definitely not grace. But it's more calling attention to what you're doing, turning this act of eating into a magical act. It's a beautiful little thing to do and incorporate. You don't have to be a Thelemite to do these sort of things, by the way. You can try out saying will over your food and seeing how it is. That ritual's also in my book. And then, when I'm also super on point, I perform something called Liber Resh Vel Helios, and this is a solar adoration ritual performed at the 4 stations of the day. So at sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight, and then people were like, hey, are you actually waking up at midnight? And no. Maybe if I was, like, really locked in, but, like, that looks like when I wake up, lunchtime, sunset, and then before I go to sleep. So I think, I'm trying to remember where they stuck. Here we go. For everyone, if you're looking for some inspiration on how to do Liber Resh, this is actually me. There's for people who
what page is that?
So that's page 271. So for people who want like a visual of the signs, that's me in my cute little towel robe I made.
Oh, you are cute.
Thank you. I say that because the hem is a nightmare. But
No, you can't tell. You can't tell.
But the idea in this tradition too
Wait,
is...
Haley, I need you to check if there's any questions online for me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea in this tradition though is you make your own magical garments, as an act of consecration. So, if they look bad, that's fine. But yeah, so here's me. And then also
No
people
questions
who are
yet.
Just getting to know me and all of this, if you would like an actual visual demonstration of how to do saying will over your food or performing liver-resh, I have a YouTube channel where I not only explain to you what these rituals are, but I actually perform it from start to finish at all 4 stations, because that didn't exist. And I'm like, hey, for especially solo practitioners, you're like, I want to know how things are pronounced. I want to actually visually see what I'm supposed to do with the magical gestures, and that's on YouTube. And it's also in my book, but if you want the video version, that's on YouTube.
I'm so glad we're talking about this, because now I have a solid source and location to direct these practitioners to when they come in and they want to learn more. This is so valuable. Now, how about you guys here? Do you have questions directly for her, as you have a front row seat? I'm sure you do.
I would like to, going back to Rose.
Yeah.
In your book, you mentioned about the Scarlet Woman.
Yeah.
So is the Scarlet Woman like this wild woman that's been described by Aleister Crowley, or is it more like the New Age woman where she's seeking for a liberty?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, great question. Yeah, thank you so much.
And the second one, where to find these Scarlet Women?
Yeah, I know. So yeah, it's a fantastic question. So obviously, like all things, there's a million different interpretations, and I'm not here to invalidate any of those. I just wanted, my book offers a platter of various ideas. I returned back to the original ones as established by the holy text and Aleister Crowley. So this idea, as laid out by the Book of the Law and Crowley and all the other commentary Crowley wrote on the Book of the Law and this idea. So the interesting thing, I guess we'll start here, is the Book of the Law calls for these spiritual offices. One of them is this thing called the Scarlet Woman. And so this idea, when we're experiencing this fluctuation of the aeons from the old aeon to the new, there was these spiritual offices to be filled by humans on Earth. And the idea was they would help usher in this current new aeon. And so both of these offices, one is the beast and one is the Scarlet Woman. Now, fun fact, Babylon is never mentioned in the Book of the Law. This idea of the goddess Babylon was connected by Aleister Crowley later to the office of the Scarlet Woman. And so another thing laid out for the incarnate being who fills these spiritual offices to usher in the new aeon is there is a list of a job description for what the Scarlet Woman is in the Book of the Law. And this is to say, this job description is not a call for all Thelemite women to be this, right? It's for this specific spiritual office, just like there's a specific spiritual office for the beast. And if you're a Thelemite guy, you're not called to be the beast. You're the only thing you're called to be is yourself, right? To seek and do thy will. And it is obviously not every single person's will to be a beast or a Scarlet Woman. Now, was this a spiritual office fulfilled in the era of Aleister Crowley and it's gone? I'm not going to tell you that. Is it something ongoing where there's incarnate being people on this earth with us who are filling these roles? Is it, just to throw out some other ideas here about how practitioners, especially modern day magicians, kind of interpret this. We have, the famous Jack Parsons. So Jack Parsons, who was, famous for inventing rocket, what?
The rocket scientist?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He was famous for inventing solid rocket fuel to get rockets to outer space. Famous for the founding of the JPL laboratory, Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. He was also a Thelemite occultist, and one of his workings was to summon a girlfriend. No, that's a talking about. But he was really...
Yeah.
He didn't need help.
No, he didn't really.
Not in that house.
Yeah.
The irony. So the idea, he wanted to get an elemental being to assist him with his magical work. So he went into the desert and did some magical work. I'm going to gloss over all of this very quickly, but some of that work was probably homosexual with, wait for it, L. Ron Hubbard. Yeah.
We're going down rabbit holes.
There's so much cool
I have so
stuff.
many questions. Okay.
Yeah. So he was doing
I've been
this.
missing out on all of this.
I know, right?
You gotta fill me in.
It's
on
so interesting. So his idea also was to kind of bring Babylon to Earth in a human form. And so he did this working in the desert. I mean, like, I'm not going to go into details because I don't want, the censors on the various
It's
online
fine.
platforms to get upset.
We'll keep it
But
PG.
yeah. So he goes in the desert. Things happen. He comes out. He goes back to his house and he sees Marjorie Cameron, and he's like, there it is. There's Babylon. That's my Scarlet Woman. Crowley was not in favor of this. Crowley was like, no, that's not what's going on, dude. But he also produced a 4th chapter of the Book of Law. All of this is not discussed in my book, by the way. But I'm just sort of, since you're interested, kind of laying out crumbs that you might want to investigate or look further into. So that was all happening. So there's like this 4th chapter of the Book of the Law floating around. Again, not recognized by Crowley. A lot of people don't consider it part of the canon, but a lot of people find it beautiful and inspiring. And then we eventually get a gentleman by the name of Kenneth Grant. And now Kenneth Grant in the Typhonian tradition, which is quite different from the Thelema Aleister Crowley setup. Again, this is not covered in my book. This is just a crumb of interest. Although I actually do mention a little bit of Grant's take on the Scarlet Woman of Babylon in my book. A little bit, just a little taste. But his idea was that this was a magical formula anyone could tap into. So instead of it being like a office you fill, this was like a magical formula you could embody a Scarlet Woman for a magical operation. And this could be male or female. And this has since traveled into the present where there's just such a diversity of perspectives. And I will plug, for people who are like, oh yeah, I want to hear more about this, I'm going to plug Manon Hindenburg White's book, The Eloquent Blood. Now, it is an academic book, but it's the best out there. And she lays out the Crowley stuff, and she lays out some modern practitioners' take on stuff. But yeah, I do explore kind of a lot, especially the stuff relating to Crowley and how he viewed it. The Scarlet Woman, Babylon, especially as it pertains to the first night of the prophet and his bride, because the bride was the first Scarlet Woman. So, yeah.
Now, what was the theme that Chris said he wanted to learn more about?
So I've got the one question about Tahuti and the Chaldean secret or prophet. But then I have a kind of an observation that it's not really a question, but I just like reflections on it. So, coming out of a liturgical sacramental Christian background, one of the things I miss.
Just say it loud enough so they can hear.
Oh
you
yeah, so I'll
Sorry,
project.
guys.
Yeah, I'll put on my projection voice here.
Thank you.
So coming out of a liturgical sacramental Christian background, with a lot of experience there.
Yeah.
One of the things that I miss in Thelema is the interface between domestic life and the magical life. Wiccans do it great, right? But in Thelema we get a lot of sort of group ritual, and then there's the private sort of temple stuff, the daily practices and all that array of options. But like in the church we'd get like magic chalk to put the sacred letters at the Epiphany over the door. We get the blessed candles. We go and get our throats blessed on the feast of St. Blaise. There are domestic celebrations around Mardi Gras, domestic observances of lengthy fasts, lengthy feasts. So I just observed that I feel like there's something of the sort of the heart and the home life and that whole rich dimension of human life.
Yeah.
And also a cult of the saints.
Sure.
We talk about them in the Gnostic Mass, but you don't get to pray to them.
I love this. I'm so happy you brought this up. So this book is going there, right? So,
good.
I obviously could not write the entirety of like the classic holy days as called for in the Book of the Law, as well as the modern observations or elaborations on that. So in the last chapter of my book, basically what I do, so there's just such a rich cornucopia and like such a rich call to celebrate very aspects of the tradition in these holy days, just hard baked into them, as I feel. So first of all, that's happening. But I think one of the modern things that has kind of come about that people do is they do celebrate the Gnostic saints throughout the year. Oh. Now, some of these Gnostic saints, we don't know their death day. You know, people have various conversations over what would be an appropriate day for this Gnostic saint, especially the kind of more mythological saints. Like
it never stopped the church, honestly.
Yeah,
that's true.
Pick a holiday.
So in my last chapter, I do mention some modern observations, and one of them is the celebration of the Gnostic saints and their feast days, which is amazing, right? Some of the other examples are Crowleymas, so that's Aleister Crowley's birthday. It's like a tongue-in-cheek kind of cute thing people have invented post-Crowley. You know.
It's his birthday.
Yeah, that's awesome. Also, Crowley's the remembrance of Crowley's passing as well, his greater feast. And when I'm saying greater feast, that's in Thelema, basically your time, the date you die.
Okay.
And then we have some other modern inventions. We mentioned there's a gentleman by the name of Dionysius Rogers, and he wrote rituals for the cross quarters, which again are not hard-baked into the original tradition as established by the Book of Law, but it's a modern invention coming from him. So we have those feast days. And then Jim Eshelman came up with this like holy season he invented, where he took this span of time and he assigned different readings for each day, and some people like to do that. So it's really interesting how these sort of things are evolving over time, and there's definitely room for not just groups, but also individuals to heed the call of the Book of the Law, to celebrate these feasts, and flesh that out for what that means for you, for your local community even, or your family. And I just think, as you said, there's just such a beautiful part of living and celebrating things, you know, not just birthdays, but also all this myriad of things in this tradition, which, you know, like you said, are there and we're not doing, for the most part.
I really appreciate that question, and what y'all are saying too. My wife is Jewish, and they have more holidays than Jews. It's crazy.
I resent that.
You know, it's nuts. And I, for years, I've been sitting around like, I wish there was a book of like holidays for Thelemites. And when you announced this, I was just like,
Same.
I think it's my summer solstice ritual by Eric Friedman, right? Yeah, hell yeah, I remember. So actually, one of the Thelemites is Jewish, and he wrote a beautiful summer solstice group ritual that I feel very blessed and I got to include. And so what's amazing is he brings that perspective of Judaism and referencing just so much. It's a merging of Thelema Judaism, sort of, and it's the summer solstice one. So I think that'll be particularly interesting and valuable for you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Now my question is, I'm an art historian by trade and an artist as well, and I am astounded when I'm in Thelemic spaces. Everyone is an artist, whether they're a musician, a poet, what have you. In your own practice, do you ritualize your art making at all? And then also for fun, just like, how does Thelema play a role in your creativity?
That's so sweet. Thank you for the question. So the question is, if I ritualize creating art, or what that looks like. And for me, yes, absolutely. Aleister Crowley defined magic as the art and science of causing change to occur in conformity with will. So art is a part of that, and I love hearing about magical spaces and communities where everyone's an artist, and that's just such a beautiful environment to be in. For me, it absolutely, I think creation is a divine act in all of its forms, and that includes art. So some of my art is I like to paint. I'm really into making pottery at the moment, and I think that can be a beautiful devotional act. It can be a beautiful mindfulness activity, but also the act of creating your own magical implements, creating your own magical tools. So when you create with intention, whether it's clay, you're making an incense holder, whether you're making the classical elemental weapons, Golden Dawn weapons, whatever you're making, or a garment, that act of creation is consecrating it to that purpose. And that's a beautiful thing. And again, you can also do cute things too, like time when you're painting something to the right, corresponding, election. I've also sort of noticed in my own observation, especially with pottery, it's like if you are doing that sort of intentional painting, intentional firing of the object, the pot or whatever, that's hard to time. So going back to just a good old traditional, you know, the election's happening at this time, let me just consecrate it with abramelon oil, you know, is perfectly valid too. But yeah, it is. And I think for me, creating art is very spiritual. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And again, this isn't a journey to being perfect or the best. It's the journey of self and doing something with that.
I like that.
Which is what making art is.
Yes,
At the end of the
exactly.
day.
Yeah.
And if I may, just one quick little
Please.
extra question. Do you think you will be making a Star Ruby and Star Sapphire like performance video like you've done with other rituals?
I plan on it. Yeah.
Cool.
It's,
I look forward to that.
Well, and someone actually asked me if I'm going to do Mass of the Phoenix as well, and like, not publicly on the algorithm of YouTube. So I think there's a lot of things I want to exist in video format, but a lot of them are not appropriate for the mainstream algorithm. Because one thing to keep in mind, and something I fight against all the time on YouTube, is someone could see that video for the first time, and that's their only impression of Thelema.
Right.
So you have to avoid jargon. You have to do the basic stuff to get everyone up to speed, or else these beginning people don't know what you're saying, and it's not serving them, and it's not serving me. So what are we doing here? So yeah, the mainstream stuff that hits the algorithm, I intentionally make it accessible. That being said, I need to nourish my soul too, and I do want to do some more advanced
Maybe
stuff.
like a Patreon or something.
Yeah,
I
that's
have
what
a
I was
Patreon.
thinking.
Sounds
So-
like we needed
yeah.
in the
So there's
Patreon.
a Patreon.
So by the way, I do have a Patreon,
Yes.
and there is a big list of videos and stuff that I don't have accessible on the main YouTube. And most of those are sort of like conversations with other practitioners, that sort of thing. But I do also give advanced lectures. So one of them is on the virtue of doubt, so exploring the role of faith and doubt in Thelema. Very advanced. I need people to understand in and out the philosophies, the basic philosophies of Thelema, who Aleister Crowley was, all of this history, before we get into like, whoa, this is some like deeper philosophical stuff. So I do want to eventually put stuff like that, on the Patreon or whatever. I definitely have aspirations for that.
Do you teach classes? If
Yes.
somebody's a brand new newcomer that says, I want to learn more about this, you do have classes for different varying levels of, okay, there you go, guys.
Yeah.
We have a new assignment.
But I will say, this is the occult aspect.
Yeah.
I do this as a service to the community, so like I'm not really monetarily motivated at all. All of my classes right now are in person. You have to like go to a place to get them, but maybe one day
Okay.
I will put them on the internet. We'll see.
Cool. Well, it's worth having
Yeah.
a discussion about
Absolutely.
a behind, because the privacy is important, and
Sure.
making sure that the level of introduction is done in the proper way.
Yeah.
Because ceremonial, there's building blocks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just automatically like, I'm a Reiki master. People are like,
Yeah.
like it was a course of years and
Oh, absolutely.
I get it.
Yeah.
So
And I always say this, I want
Yeah.
everyone to be successful. I want
Right.
everyone on this path to succeed in whatever that means to them, to be in a beautiful, healthy place. And I
Yeah.
do believe certain more advanced things, when given to someone who doesn't know what's going on, will mess their stuff up.
And that's okay. So that's an important tip for you people. Yeah, for all the interwebs, everybody that's like, quick fix. This is a practice. This is a lifestyle. This is a dedication. You can hear just from our discussion, she's been doing this for decades. Even though she looks so young and youthful, this has been something she's been doing since her early days, and it takes time to evolve, and it's an investment.
That makeup's working overtime.
No,
Well,
it's behold the power of magic.
No, you're beautiful. No, seriously, but the thing
Your
is,
youth is
like,
renewed.
in the day,
Violet.
but in the day of instant gratification, and everybody gets these little snippets of information, and like the TikToks and everything.
Yeah.
When you come in here, books. I mean, it's a practice. We learn from those who have gone before us. We learn, and we go down rabbit holes, and we said, well, what about this influence, and what about this influence, and then this is tied to this, but that doesn't just, you can't just matrix download it to your brain. Like, you have to learn, you have to apply it, you have to see what feels comfortable to you, what feels natural and authentic to you. You have to honor those influences that have brought you to this point. You know, everything's done with reverence and integrity, and that's how you build a solid practice that's going to serve you well. Whatever that looks like for you. But what we do here is we educate, we introduce, we provide resources, but it's not a quick fix. This is like magic, but it's not like a magic bullet. You know, and I applaud you for your dedication. I think it's beautiful. Yeah, no, and this sounds like a really valuable resource. I'm enjoying learning about this.
Good.
What's our time check? Because like I said, I could talk to you for hours.
Likewise, that's great.
What time is it?
It's 5:11.
We've already exceeded an hour. So, okay. Were there any final questions online before we...
All right, Tahuti.
I can't even see it.
Tahuti and the Child of the Prophet. So I put out sort of 3 different ideas. So like, Tahuti, I'll just read from my book, so just really fast. Tahuti is understood to be the Lord of Wisdom and of Utterance in the invocation of Liber Israfel that Crowley performed March 17th, 3 days prior to the equinox of the gods. Tahuti stands in the gates of heaven, blah, 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 blah. And that's, I just hear a lot of people like, okay, well then that's the date. It's like, okay, well hold on. What about the Child of the Prophet stuff? Let's think about that. The only thing Aleister Crowley officially says about this is that it is suitable for initiates only. That's it. Thanks, Crowley. What are we going to do with that? So, I will say this. So this is the first idea. Take it or leave it. When Aleister Crowley is being coy with his explanations, remember this is the Victorian era, he's typically talking about sex magic. He's typically talking about that realm. When he's talking about children, that was a euphemism for semen. So Tahuti and the Child of the Prophet could very well be in reference to your own personal first time you have sex. It could be the first time you've performed a sex magic operation. Those are all on the table. Another thing going on with this day is, of course, I'm going to cover the journal stuff first. So in Aleister Crowley's personal copy of the Book of the Law, instead of, it's actually misprinted. Instead of saying Tahuti and the Child of the Prophet, it says Tahuti and the Children of the Prophet. So he had a misprinted copy he was working with. And in the margins next to that, he wrote 3 dates. The first 2 dates were his 2 children he had when he was married to Rose. And the 3rd date, the one that doesn't match the set, is the date of his child, or the child that he thought was his, with his mistress at the time he was married to Rose. So, it could be the birthday of this 3rd child he had with his mistress, or who he believed was his child. And, you know, you can interpret that many different ways. Like, oh, maybe this was this child's, and this experience set him on the path. He furthered down this path to do this. Maybe. Here's another interesting thing. In Thelemic history, a controversial but important figure was Frater Cod. And so Frater Cod was a student of Aleister Crowley's, but also and a very brilliant magician, but also someone he came to understand as his magical child. So the idea being, he did a sex magic operation with a woman, and as a result of that, it aligned with Frater Cod's initiation date, and that being his magical birthday. So for people who are hearing this term magical birthday for the first time, a lot of magicians, specifically ceremonial magicians, consider their initiation into an important degree, a secret society, stuff like that, to be their magical birthday. Aleister Crowley's magical birthday, which you can also celebrate in terms of modern things, was his initiation into the Golden Dawn. So he actually, even though he had a falling out with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, he considered his initiation, his magical birthday, the rest of his life, and he observed it. So that's interesting. But let's get back to Frater Cod. So we have Frater Cod to thank for the reason we call it Liber Al. He made the observation there in terms of the language, and I unpack all of this in my book. And I just want to get to the point here, which was, it is possible that this date refers to Aleister Crowley's magical child, Frater Cod. So, isn't that something? It's a lot there.
A lot to work with.
A lot to work with, a lot to think about. maybe a fourth or fifth real reason. I don't know, but that's all I could find, and I think those are all very reasonable interpretations of that.
Any final questions or statements? Or?
Yeah. Anyone who wants
Somebody
to share?
has something on the.
Oh yeah.
Let me see what they
Thank
say.
you for the question.
Yeah, let's see what it says. Thank you for sharing all this wealth of information. As an art educator and an artist, I always knew of Crowley from his artwork, but it was interesting to learn about Thelema now. And then, yes, there will be signed copies. Send us a DM so we can get one from. Yeah, Alex said, yeah, because people are like, this is fascinating, really interesting, wanting to know more, want to get the book. Yes, we'll make sure you sign all of them.
Awesome, yeah, and I want to say one extra thing, speaking of art, is this cover wasn't just some random stuff.
It's beautiful.
I actually, this is not my art, but like I made art of this vision and like what I had in mind, so I just want to unpack it really fast. So the unicrystal hexagram with a 5-petal rose in the center is a symbol made by Aleister Crowley, specifically the one with the rose in the middle, associated with this tradition. Cool. We have the planetary forces on the outside, and we have the macrocosm, and then the inside we have the microcosm. So it's a pentagram, and the 5 petals represent the elements, and pointing up with spirit on top. Cool, this is happening. But if you can actually overlay this on top of the, as we talked about, the Kabbalistic tree of life. So what is that? This is this model for understanding how God spoke creation into existence, the unfolding of creation. You can also understand it not only from divine down, but it's also your path up from Malkuth here on earth up to Kether the divine. Okay. So this spiritual path, the way of return, all of this. There are multiple Kabbalistic trees of life. Aleister Crowley worked with one. This is the one that this is sort of in reference to. Obviously, is it the right one? I leave that up to you to think about.
It's in here. You included it.
Yeah, I included one of them, the sort of standard one that us magicians use. But yeah, check out the Sefer Yetzirah. I actually recommend that. There's a great reading list in the back, and the Sefer Yetzirah is on it. So much more goodies in there. Anyway, so if you overlay this in the Tree of Life, the idea is we're starting down here at Malkuth, where the bottom of the rose is starting to bud, and so we have new growth where you're just starting on this path. And then we have the rose blooming in the center at Tiferet, associated with the sun. So again, coming into the idea of the alchemical mystical marriage, coming into that union, what we would call in this tradition, with a holy guardian angel. And then as you continue up this journey of the Tree of Life, you see the stick doesn't have leaves, it's dead. And this is associated with crossing the abyss, or dot, associated with Bina, death, and this idea in this tradition, very important on this spiritual path, should one wish to go on this, of death, the idea of dissolution of ego. So this is why the rose is growing, blooming, and dying. And this is my own, from my own mystical visions of it.
I love that.
I love that art.
I'm a ceremonial magician. I can't be chill with anything. Everything has to be.
I love that.
Yeah, has to have like layers of meaning. So enjoy that. Yeah, enjoy that.
Very
and
cool.
a new take on it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
This is wonderful.
We appreciate you, and this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Yeah,
I appreciate you
likewise.
coming here.
Thank you so much. This is a beautiful space, and I gotta come back.
You do. Before I
Thank you.
close it out, tell them your handles one more time, and then we'll save this.
Absolutely. So my name is Maevius Lynn. You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, Threads, Blue Sky,
Patreon.
I got a Patreon. I actually run a book club on Patreon, as well as like a little study thing. There's a lot of little extras on Patreon you can get too, and then I have handouts on my website, which is maeviuslynn.com. I have not updated my link tree with my website. Actually, my website is on my book too. So if you want some nice little downloads for free, I have a Thoth Tarot download. I have an online resources download, and something else I made for you all. So I just want you all to be successful, and thank you for this.
Yeah.
This time.
So we have these books for sale, and we'll also have our signed book plates, because I have a feeling these are going to sell out,
Good.
and then we'll order more.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Let me go.